Researchers at Boston University have gotten themselves in the barrel a little bit for some rather shocking research that it turns out their government sponsors did not know that they were even involved in. Essentially, what's going on here is that, and this, I would call this gain of function, not a scientist, I'm going to call this gain of function.
But they do like to play it fast and loose with the definition to skirt around regulations.
So basically what they've done here is they've taken the spike protein from Omicron, which is it is that spike protein that has made it kind of the most infectious version, despite the fact that, and probably related to the fact that Omicron itself was less virulent, less what's the word? Less deadly.
Right.
Less dangerous to you. And so they took the spike protein that made it that infectious, and they attached it to the more deadly version, the earlier version, because they wanted to then experiment on mice to find out if giving mice this deadly version killed them.
Little Franken-COVID.
Yeah, and so 8 of the 10 mice that were purposely infected with this engineered virus, this engineered pathogen, in this lab in Boston University, right in Boston, died. And so the headlines come with an 80% mortality rate. That doesn't exactly translate to people, but they also did experiment with human cells. So this news was first broken by the Daily Mail. Other right-wing outlets followed up on it. Stat News has since done some additional reporting. We've reached out to Boston University for comment, as well as to NIAID, the NIH branch that funded this research. What they told Stat News, which is the kind of health policy outlet, is that they didn't know that the Boston University researchers were going to do this. Let me see.
NIAID didn't know?
Yeah, so...
Okay, and that's an important, I think, piece of this puzzle, because the government sponsoring it is exactly what's in question in Wuhan, right? This is a government, a lab funded by government grants. And so if that's the case here, again, it just shows how little oversight there is with our money.
Right, and so Boston University's spokesperson, Rachel Cavalario, who commented to Stat News, is trying to deny that this is gain-of-function research, saying that it's actually reducing function, basically. Her quote to Stat News was, "In fact, this research made the virus replication less dangerous." But it is making it more pathogenic, and it's making it more deadly. So what's going on here is they're manipulating these viruses and then stepping back and saying, well, actually, it's not gaining function. 8 of 10 mice died, but we're not going to call that gain of function.
Right, but if you're manipulating the function, whether it's actually the semantics over the word gain and the word function, right? So is the function transmission? Is the function death? Like, what is the function? And then what, that's why the conversation over gain of function, we've seen the back and forth between Rand Paul and Anthony Fauci in Congress over this. Fauci and other researchers who, by the way, have very legitimate reasons in some cases for wanting to do this research, right? Like the temptation to do this research and the sort of theory behind doing this research is one that reasonable people can disagree with. And we've talked to people on both sides of that argument. Both of us are pretty strongly in the don't enhance the virus camp in a lab. But I do think reasonable people can disagree with it. And it's easy to understand why researchers want to do this. It actually broke into the news cycle this time based on a preprint, right? So this is not a peer-reviewed study, but they published their research.
Preprint here.
Right, yeah, there's the element. You can see it up on the screen. This is the preprint study, and then the media kind of picked up on the fact, and I think it was Daily Mail, Fox News, local Boston paper had it too, that this is happening. So that's how they are actually looking to get this. This is in the peer review process, but they published the research. They published a study based on the research, and that's how we sort of know that this happened at all.
Right, and so here's the comment to Stat News from NIAID's Emily Erbelding, director of NIAID's Division of Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, said the BU team's original grant application did not specify that the scientists wanted to do this precise work, nor did the group make clear that it was doing experiments that might involve enhancing a pathogen of pandemic potential in the progress reports it provided to NIAID. Erbelding told Stat in an interview, "I think we're going to have conversations over upcoming days." Asked if the research team should have informed them of its intention to do the work, she said, "We wish that they would have." Yes. Now, this story has since been updated with some pretty angry comments from Boston University related to what I was saying earlier, saying that no, in fact, this is not what you're saying that it is. You should relax. This is fine. But people can judge for themselves whether they think moving the spike protein into a more virulent pathogen is something that we want being done in the middle of a big population center. Now, what Boston University will say is, we're a BSL-3 lab. They've put out a little video that shows the doctors putting on their spacesuits and going into the lab to kind of demonstrate, just how serious they are. They show their HEPA filters and everything else. It's like, okay, I'm glad that you're taking this seriously. You're taking it seriously because of the extreme risk that's involved here.
I mean, I do think there are labs that probably did take it seriously before COVID,
for sure.
right?
Oh, absolutely.
And took it, actually had the security precautions that we now know were in question at the Wuhan lab.
But they're not always 100%.
Exactly. And your point was that basically the reason that you have to take these precautions extremely seriously is because of the risk involved in the first place. So it's sort of a concession of the point that this is an extremely risky endeavor, period.
And I mean, you learned that when you attach a spike protein, it was more infectious? I'm not a virologist, but I could have told you that.
If the government spokesperson's reaction, and that's why I keyed on the word enhancing, if the government spokesperson's reaction is to, they have the study, right? It's not a super long study. You can download the PDF, and again, it hasn't been peer reviewed, but the government presumably looked over that study before they gave comment to the media. If they're using the word enhancing,
well, it was the reporter, but they're responding to it,
Right. So if the word enhancing is involved, then you know that we're getting into the semantic conversation about what is and what is not gain of function, when what we're actually doing is manipulating the function of the spike protein to see if it can be more X, Y, or Z.
Right, and you don't always know what the result is going to be, which is why you're supposed to get permission ahead of time for all of these different, precise experiments. For people who have been living in a cave, the context for this is that the Wuhan Institute of Virology, with funding from U.S. organization EcoHealth Alliance, which itself was getting funding from NIAID, was engaged in what people say was risky research that had the potential to have created COVID-19. And so scientists from across the spectrum still say that is within the realm of possibility, that the kind of nature versus lab hypotheses are both still possible, and neither has been proven without a doubt, which is why there's so much concern when you start to see this, when this paper hit the press and then gets into the. But it's interesting that it first was for a day or two in the conservative press, before then health. The Stat News, which is a well-regarded scientific journal, or scientific, not journal, but newspaper. But on the progressive side, and in the mainstream media side, you don't see much concern over this.
The Intercept has, incredible coverage of the entire sort of gain and function.
Kind of out on a limb there.
Yeah, it's just been fantastic. And I've seen conservative media actually cite it a good deal. But even this news, it's been in Fox News, it's been in fairly big outlets, the New York Post. The legacy media has not touched it so far that I've seen. That could have changed since I last checked, but so far it hasn't touched this story. And I think what makes this worth discussing in the context of COVID is specifically that we know our government was funding these studies without providing adequate oversight, and we know that they've been less than forthcoming about what they knew, how they knew it, and whether or not they were acting responsibly in the course of the research in Wuhan and providing funding for that research in in Wuhan. So, and we know that the medical community was very defensive of that too, in a way that made it, Peter Daszak at EcoHealth Alliance made it difficult to ascertain exactly what was happening and whether it was being done responsibly. And so when you have more government money going, even if it's in a responsible, secure lab in the United States of America, even if that's happening, we just had over 1 million people die. We have been on lockdowns. The country has been ravaged by COVID over the last couple of years. We need to know, and we need to know if you don't know. Like, if you don't know where your money is going at this point, give me a break.
Right, and we don't want to shut down scientific research. That's not at all what the critics and the skeptics of this research are saying. They're saying that because of the clear potential cost to the public, you have to be much clearer about the benefits that you're going to bring to the public from this research. It can't just be science for the sake of science. Like, there has to be some public health pursuit that's involved here. You have to show how you could actually get to that, and you have to show how you're following safety protocols and how you're being fully transparent along the way. And when the NIAID is telling the press that they didn't know about this and that they wish they had, that doesn't inspire confidence.
No, and it's the same thing. We're going back to exactly what was happening in the Wuhan lab, and that's the bottom line. Like, we are not doctors or researchers, medical scientists. We're journalists, and our job is to hold people in powerful positions accountable. But whether you're a member of the public or a journalist or whatever, like, your job, you have to place some measure of trust in experts. Like, we cannot all be experts in the safety of this kind of research. But what we can do is make sure that people are doing it responsibly, and they're doing it with the utmost security, and they're balancing the concerns of not wanting another pandemic or any pandemic or an accident or whatever it is, with the concerns of medical advancement and research, et cetera, et cetera. But they have to prove that they deserve that trust, and this is another example of them failing on that measure within the context of 2020 to 2022. We're still in 2022. We're still in a couple of years of this, and the country is going to take years to recover.
Yeah, and if Republicans do take the House, this is the kind of thing that I think researchers are going to have to expect that they're going to get investigated over. It could be the one upside of a Republican majority, because this is, like, to me, after potential immediate threat of nuclear war, this is one of the most important, or maybe the second most important issue in the world.
The immediate mass threat to millions and millions of people is on the line.
And there's been an explosive growth in the number of these labs around the world that are now doing this extraordinarily risky research, even just over the past couple of years. And the tragedy is that some of that has been sparked by the pandemic, which may itself have been sparked by a lab accident. And so if you now have dozens of labs around the world, and a lot of them doing what they call kind of dual use, which is both for military purposes and for civilian purposes, the risk of either a purposeful release or an accidental release just goes up by the number of labs that you expand across the world.
Right. Yeah, and they're doing all of this with a huge deficit of public trust. Democrats have shown very little curiosity to getting to the bottom of this. It's absolutely true. Whether it's for political reasons or legitimate moral reasons, Republicans will be, if they win the House, they will absolutely be overturning the medical community, looking for evidence of what's happening with this. So an important story to follow, certainly.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.